Welcome to Waypoint Real Talk, where we discuss real estate and your home. Let's get started with your hosts, Aaron Shishilla and Austin Hines.
Waypoint Real Talk. My name is Aaron, and with me I don't have Austin. Austin is taking a little behind-the-scenes approach today, but today we have another awesome podcast. We're actually re-recording this one because we didn't save the audio, but that's okay. So we have the amazing Crystal Brady here, another top producing agent. Crystal,
hi.
What are we going to be talking about?
We're going to talk about how to virtually pre-screen your home. Mm-hmm. And the goal here would be to do as much research as possible before actually going in person to see that home. So virtually pre-screening has a lot of different areas that we can talk about, ways you can sort of narrow down houses before you go out in person. You may not qualify. There might be deal breakers, things we can discover by doing that online research before we go look at a house to save us time.
Mm-hmm. So you're talking about like Realtor.com, Zillow.com, how we can use those search functions to actually find the houses that are a good fit for us.
Yes, and also real estate agents like myself, I set my clients up on MLS searches, so they're receiving alerts with new properties, but clients also inevitably are looking on Zillow and Realtor.com themselves. And so any place you're getting houses sent to you online, or you're just kind of combing through doing those internet searches and you're finding houses, a lot of buyers get really excited and then immediately say, I want to go see these 5 that I just found on the internet, without really looking at them real closely first. So that's what we're going to talk about, is how to virtually sort of pre-screen them, weed some of the ones out that have certain deal breakers or features that aren't going to work. Or maybe you don't financially qualify because you didn't really look at all the details on it first. So just kind of how to do that to make your search more efficient.
Yeah. I think it's funny because when we're looking at Zillow or Realtor.com, we look at the pictures.
Yes.
And we say, oh, this house is so nice.
Yes.
And then you get Crystal Brady, who knows what she's doing. And she goes, well, the roof is older and we can't really afford to replace this roof because of it's a stretch budget already. Mm-hmm. So other topics we're going to be looking are different sections of this one. We have where you wrote down view pictures and video tours, research facts and figures, watch out for buzzwords. So we're going to be talking about that as well. Learn about the area and don't be fooled if it looks too good to be true. Yep. So going into viewing pictures and video tours, how do we look at pictures and the video tours?
So like you said, everybody starts by looking at those pictures online, right? That's the very first thing that we're all going to do is scroll through them. The more pictures, the better. If it has lots of pictures, then we're off to a good start because now we're going to get a pretty good idea of what we're dealing with. Mm-hmm. If it only has 1 or 2 pictures of the exterior and no interior photos, that should be your first red flag. Especially if you're one of those buyers that says to your real estate agent, I need a move-in ready house with all the upgrades, and they're only showing 1 picture of the outside. Most of the time, that's sort of the kiss of death. It's not going to be nice inside. It's going to be trashy. Not every case, but it should be a red flag. That should go on your radar right away. Mm-hmm. So that's going to warrant a lot more exploration on your part, reading the description and doing some of those things to see how they're describing the home. And we'll get into some of that later. But obviously, the more pictures, the better. You need to look out for those virtual tours, which right now has become a huge thing. Virtual tours always have existed, but lately we've really stepped it up as real estate agents, and there's a lot of great actual video walkthroughs available and Matterport tours. Matterport is going to be, if you're not familiar with it, it's the one where it's kind of like when you go on Google Street View and it lets you push the arrows and drive down the street and do that sort of thing. It does that inside the home. So it lets you control the pace and where you go within that tour of the home. So it's almost like you're walking through it, but you're doing it online. So if you can find a virtual tour link or a Matterport link, definitely take a look at that as well. That's going to help you determine whether or not you think the floor plan would work for you. So you definitely want to pay attention to those sort of things. So any virtual tours or walkthroughs, or even just really good pictures with lots of angles, will help you see the lay of the home. So that would be kind of step 1. I would say if you know you need an open kitchen, for example, that opens to the family room and that's a deal breaker for you, well, pay attention to that. Don't just look at all of the shiny, cute finishes, like pay attention and say, well, where do I see the kitchen in these pictures? Or where is it on this virtual tour? Is it open to the family room like I require? If that's a deal breaker for you.
Right.
So looking for those kinds of things basically is going to be what I would say would be like step one to pre-screening through pictures and video.
Right. So I think it's interesting that we talked previously about this, and you even have it written down here. Real estate agents, when you're looking at those pictures, you know that a picture has been edited to make it look like it's more bright in the room.
Yes.
Looks cleaner in the house. Coming from a home inspection standpoint, I would inspect a home, and that's the first thing I would look at. And then maybe later on, I might play a game with the other home inspectors and say, well, how much do you think this house is worth?
Yeah.
And then we look on Zillow and we look at the pictures.
Yeah.
Well, the pictures on Zillow, you can directly tell what has been edited and the different items that you mentioned, the countertops, the cabinets. Looking at those specific items give you so much great insight as to the rest of the house.
Yes.
Right?
And that's an excellent point. So I'll have clients sometimes that'll say to me, well, I really have to have high-end upgrades. So I must have granite or quartz countertops and upgraded cabinetry and the wood floors. And they want that level of finish. They'll send me houses and I start going through the pictures myself and I'll start kind of really looking. And I can tell, because I look at homes all the time, well, that's a laminate countertop, not granite or quartz. Those are 30-inch builder-grade wood cabinets. That's 12 by 12 tile on the floor. It's very small, and a lot of times because there's maybe really cute furniture and the house has been well maintained, and through staging and photo editing, like you said, it looks really pretty when you look through the pictures, and they're just completely overlooking those details. So then I might go back to my client and say, well, did you notice that in the kitchen and baths, it doesn't have granite or quartz? It's really just cheap laminate countertops from 1990. No, I didn't notice that, and then there you go. Now they decide whether they still want to see that home or not. But if they really are sticking to their guns and want those high-end finishes, then that's a house they're not going to want to look at if they know they're not willing to do the work and tear those countertops out and put new ones in. So paying attention to the upgrades and features and really looking at each picture and look at the cabinets, the countertops, the floors, or whatever's important to you. Just be looking for those things. Don't get distracted by the beautiful furniture, which doesn't stay with the house.
In the bright room.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So getting into the next one, which is facts and figures.
Yes.
What do we mean? What facts and figures are we looking at?
So there's a lot of different things that you can find, even if you're just looking on Zillow or Realtor.com, that are going to help you narrow things down a bit more. The first thing you might want to look at in terms of facts and figures is days on market, which sometimes is labeled DOM as an abbreviation when you're looking on the different websites. So if you ever see DOM or ADOM, those are generally abbreviations for days on market. So a house that's priced appropriately and move-in ready is typically going to sell with multiple offers and very fast in this current climate that we have, this market. So if days on market are very long, the house, you click through the pictures and everything looks great. It looks like everything you've dreamed of. And days on market is several months, like 90 days plus or more. Sometimes you'll see houses that are almost a year on the market. Well, that should be a red flag. It doesn't always mean there's something wrong with it, but I will tell you that there is a reason if it's priced appropriately and move-in ready, it hasn't sold. And that reason could be a deal breaker for you. So that might warrant further investigation on your part if you see lots of days on market.
You mentioned, like, I'm assuming the A in front of DOM was average.
I believe so, yeah.
So with that, what would be the average days on market? I guess it depends on how hot the market is.
Sure,
but what numbers should we be looking at for if this house is okay to look at, or if it's something like, hey, there might be a red flag in this house?
If it's been on the market more than 60 days and it appears to be priced correctly and it looks very move-in ready, then I would say that's probably a bit of a red flag. Now, what I would start to do next is figure out why it's been on the market, and you can investigate that some too. Again, those virtual tours, looking at the floor plan. I've had houses before that are older they were built in maybe the 50s or the 60s, don't have a master bedroom with an ensuite. And people might want that. And that could be the reason it hasn't sold. It could be a function of the floor plan, a house that's not open, a house that's missing a key feature like a master bedroom with an ensuite. So it could be something uncontrollable that's just the way that the home is. And it's taking a lot of buyers to run through it to find one that doesn't care. It may not be a deal breaker for you. You might be fine without that master bedroom with an ensuite, but a lot of the masses, generally speaking, might want that feature, and that might be why it's sitting. So it's not always a horrible reason. Sometimes it's just a function of the floor plan, and that's why it's sitting. So if you might be able to determine that with that virtual tour or walk through a Matterport or something, if they have that available, sometimes it backs up to an undesirable situation. So there might be a busy road behind it or other reasons like that it's sitting on the market. It could be that it's overpriced. There could be nothing wrong with it. It could just be very overpriced. That's another reason homes sit on the market. So it's not always a problem, but it could be. It could be something wrong with that house. So I would say 60 days plus, you might want to dig in a little deeper, see if you can figure out if there's something else going on there.
So what are the other facts and figures we need to be looking out for?
So there's a few other things that are going to be on the information you can see on the listing, and that's going to be the property tax information, homeowners association, if there is one, flood insurance. Those are all figures that you want to be checking that could affect you being approved for purchasing the home. So for instance, if your lender was not factoring in you paying flood insurance, and this house has flood insurance, and your debt to income ratio is a little tight, then you may not qualify for this home because it requires flood insurance. So just knowing if it does or does not require that might give you an indication if maybe you need to check with your lender about that before you go out and see the home and fall in love with it and then realize you can't afford it. And so that's why I recommend people check the facts and figures, because that happens sometimes. Same thing with homeowners association and taxes. Most deed restricted communities are going to have those homeowners associations, and your lender generally will budget for that when doing your pre-approval, but they don't know exactly what neighborhood and exactly what house you're going to buy, so they have to put in some kind of average. If this house happened to have above average HOA fees, again, you may no longer qualify. So just check the HOA, make sure it seems in line with the other homes you've been looking at. I had one recently. A buyer sent me this house. It looked great. It was everything they wanted. They wanted to see it. I pulled up the information on it and noticed that the HOA was really high. It was, I'm trying to remember how much. I think it was about $5,000 a year, which is crazy high for a single family home.
Can we get a calculation?
A lot.
A lot of
money.
months.
So their lender might have only been budgeting $100 a month, but this was 4 or 5 times that amount.
Right.
And so they would never qualify for that home financially on paper, so there's no reason to go see it. And I called the listing agent because honestly, it was such a huge figure. I thought this must be a typo in the MLS, but it just happened to be in a community with an exclusive country club that you become a member of that is also mandatory. And so there were all these benefits coming with it, and it was kind of an exclusive type deal, and it did have an unusually high HOA. But the buyer didn't know that because they weren't familiar with that specific neighborhood. They just saw the house. They loved it. It looked right for them. And then we realized the HOA was going to affect them qualifying. So that's why you want to look at those facts and figures. And property tax is the same thing. Lenders are always going to estimate an average property tax for the purchase price in the area that you're looking in. But if the taxes are extra high, that could also affect qualifying. So just take a look at those things and make sure they look in line with what you've been looking at already. And if you're not sure, check with your lender.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point, because a lot of times we don't take into consideration, we look at the price of the house, but we don't look at the other monthly expenses that make up the loan that your pre-approval should go over, which is the HOA, property taxes, and possibly even flood insurance, as you mentioned.
And for the realtors listening, that's definitely something you should be discussing with a lender as well. As soon as my buyers get pre-approved for a mortgage, I go back to that lender and say, great, for this price that you approved them for, what are you estimating for property taxes and HOA fees? Right. Just so I know, okay, you're estimating taxes are going to be $4,000 a year. I know if they start looking at houses and taxes are $6,000 a year, I better go back to that lender and say, I know you're only estimating $4,000. If this house is $6,000, are they still approved? And I try to do that for my clients as well. It's nice to kind of have that double check. You know, if the buyer and the realtor are both focused on those facts and figures, it's going to help you both not waste time and look at properties that you might not be able to buy.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So getting into the next one, we have on here, or at least you wrote out, find out the age of the roof, AC, and other major systems.
Yes.
Read the disclosures if available. So how can we go about doing that on Realtor.com and like Zillow?
So always look for the age of big ticket items is what I say. That's going to be your roof, your air conditioner, appliances, maybe pool equipment, things like that. So anything that could be $1,000+ let's say. If you can find out the age, that might be helpful for you as a buyer to know if those systems are coming near the end of their useful life and you will have to be replacing them, because you know if you can afford it or not as a buyer. So some of those items you cannot find on Realtor.com or Zillow, such as the disclosures. So there is a document we use in the business a lot called a seller's property disclosure. And a lot of times the listing agent will attach that document in the MLS, but that's something that your real estate agent would have to go out and find. So you can ask your realtor, if you find a house that you're interested in, if they can go out and look for disclosures in the system. If they're there, they can grab them and email them over to you. Typically, there are questions on most of the disclosures that will say how old is the roof, how old is the air conditioner, and some of those major systems, they're going to talk about the ages. But the thing that you can do before that is you can look at the description. So there's always going to be that public remark description where it kind of has the paragraph and it's describing the home,
right?
Underneath the pictures typically. So you can do that. And a lot of times realtors are going to put in there the age of the big systems because they want to flaunt that aspect of the home. For instance, if the roof is only 3 or 4 years old, they're going to mention that. And you can find that information when you are just sort of reading through. So look for that. If it doesn't say anything in the description about the age of the roof or the air conditioner, you definitely want to go back and ask, because that might mean it's really old and that's why they're not talking about it.
Right. And for those that are listening, you might be able to get onto our website. So if it's on YouTube, just go to the description below. There's actually a link to your blog that you've written out. In that blog on our website, we also have resources in there for roof lifespan, AC lifespan. What do we also have in here? Roof, AC, electrical. So if you need to check out those items to see, hey, this AC unit is 6 years old, what does that look like for when I need to replace it?
Exactly.
So you can just go to our resources on there.
And this is another reason, just to piggyback on that, finding out the age of these big ticket items is what's going to help you virtually pre-screen. So sometimes I'll have clients that I know are using most of their available funds to get into the house. They've got to do their down payment, their closing cost. And so there's that big upfront investment when you purchase a home. You may not have an extra $10,000 or $15,000 laying around beyond that to replace a roof in the next year, should that home need a roof that quickly.
Yeah.
So a lot of times I'm having those conversations with my clients. I'm kind of knowing if they can do a fixer-upper, if they could replace a roof, or they could do cosmetic updates or those kinds of things. But if they tell me, no, I really can't invest a lot of money in this home the next few years, I'm going to have to start saving again for future improvements, that tells me they need a house with a roof that's going to have some life expectancy. So if they send me a listing and I see it has an original roof that needs to be replaced in the next 6 months, and it's an as-is contract and the seller's not going to do that, then we probably shouldn't be looking at that home, because they're going to have to replace that roof so quick, and I know they don't have the money to do it. So that's the other reason you really want to pay attention to these, because that's going to eliminate some homes off your list. Insurance companies will not insure a roof after 20 years. It's going to have to be replaced by somebody. And if the seller's not willing to do it, then that's probably a home your buyer should pass on.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Now, going back into, you mentioned the introduction, the description of the property, you have what you call buzzwords to look out for.
Yes.
So what are those buzzwords?
So as you're reading through those descriptions, you will see some commonly used phrases, which I'm sure everyone's heard of. Things like fixer-upper, needs TLC, handyman special. If you see any of those words being used in the description of the listing, then that is definitely going to be a house that needs some work. At minimum, probably a total cosmetic overhaul. But usually when they're using those words, they need even more. These could be your houses that are in such disrepair that they're not going to qualify for a mortgage. And most buyers are not purchasing with all cash. If they are, they have nothing to worry about. But most people, are trying to get that mortgage. And so the home needs to be in a certain condition and at a certain level. But sometimes they're concealing in the photographs those major defects. So if there's maybe 6 or 7 pictures. You're seeing a little bit of the kitchen or a little bit of this, but you're not really seeing the whole house. And then they're using words like needs TLC, handyman special. There's some major things going on with that house they are not showing you. They're not showing you a big gaping hole in the roof or missing flooring or, it's stripped down to the studs in one room. That's usually what we're talking about.
I actually had a house that I inspected. I didn't inspect the roof on this property, but there was a literal hole in the roof.
Yes.
Like a baseball went through the roof.
Yes.
We took a picture. This was for a separate company. It wasn't Waypoint. It was back when I was in the other home inspection company I previously worked for. And they didn't write any of those items in the description of the property.
Mm-hmm.
But then what was interesting, and I know we're getting kind of sidetracked, is we took a picture of it saying it was notated in the report. And then they come back and said, you put a hole in our roof. But anyway, I thought that was interesting.
I got to tell you, you would be surprised what you see when you get there in person. Like you mentioned earlier, a lot of times that homes are portrayed to be a bit nicer through photo editing and things like that than they actually are in real life. So we've got that we're already contending with. But then when they're literally just not showing you major defects, but they're using these buzzwords, that's your key there that you need to pay attention to. That's
right.
The big red flag when you see that. But I've had ones that online looked okay. Maybe they just had 4 or 5 pictures, but those pictures looked okay. I get there and there's an entire bedroom they didn't show that the whole ceiling has caved in, and I'm seeing major things like that are going to immediately eliminate that home from qualifying for a mortgage.
Yeah.
So what I would recommend, if you're seeing those buzzwords, but the pictures still look okay and you really want to pursue this house, have your realtor call the other agent and find out if it qualifies for financing. The other agent who's listing that property will be able to say right away, no, there's too many issues with this home. It's not going to qualify for anything. It needs to be a cash purchase. And then
Mm-hmm.
So just definitely be careful with those buzzwords because a lot of times they're going to get you in trouble.
So moving on, we have, I think, 2 other tips for
Mm-hmm.
looking at homes online. We have learning about the area, which I think we could probably say that should be your last one, because now that you checked everything off, maybe you can go drive by yourself and learn about the area. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. There's a couple of different things you can do. So sometimes buyers are local. They already know what neighborhood they want to buy in and they're very familiar with it. So people that know West Chase pretty much know what to expect there. They don't really need to drive through West Chase. They know when a house pops on the market there, that's where they want to live. But if they're from out of town or they're new to the area, then yes, driving by is a great idea. Going by at different times of the day, seeing the residents that live there just to kind of check it out. If it's not deed restricted or in a homeowners association, you really need to check it out, I would say, because the homeowners associations are enforcing a more uniform look in the community. They're going to enforce the rules and make sure the exterior of most of those homes are looking really good. But if you're not in a deed restricted area, you could have one house is beautiful and the house right next door could have grass 4 feet high and a fence that's falling over, which you may not want to live next to that house. It could be in total disrepair. So this is where driving by can definitely be helpful. If you can't drive by, then I always recommend people get on Google. Google Maps, as you know, is a very useful tool. And you can jump on there, do that little street view, drive up and down the street and just kind of see how the other houses look. If everything looks good, that's great. And then also finding out what's behind the house, because that can be a big thing as well. Sometimes houses are great in every way, but you don't notice in the listing it backs up to a really busy road, or there's a big power line behind it, or maybe
a
railroad, or I had one the other day, there was a storage facility right behind it, and you couldn't really see in the pictures anything. It just looked like a little patio and then a fence. Well, on the other side of that fence directly was a big commercial building with a storage facility, and a bunch of boats and RVs were parked right on the other side of the fence. And when you kind of backed it up or went on aerial view on Google, you could see all of that.
Mm-hmm. They
didn't want to live backing up to the storage facility, so that was a deal breaker for that client. So just kind of taking a look at the map, not just the street view, but also the aerial, will help you learn about the area and what's around the house. So I always recommend people do that too.
So what's our last one, which is, if it's too good to be true, then it is. How do we know if something is too good to be true?
Yeah, so just like most things in life, the same rule here applies in real estate. If it does seem too good to be true when you're clicking through those pictures and it is so upgraded and beautiful and it's a great price and it's a huge amount of square footage, and every other house you look at that's this price is 1,000 square feet smaller. How can this be? It just seems too good to be true. Then it definitely is. When people send me those houses, normally they might be looking at 2,500 square foot houses, let's say for 400,000. Now in the same area of town, they're sending me one that's 4,000 square feet for 400,000, same price. I immediately know something's going on with this house. And so I'll usually jump on the MLS and I say to myself, it's got to have a sinkhole or, Chinese drywall. Exactly. And usually they do. So, and the clients, unfortunately, don't typically see that information. It's not really their fault, because we have a section in the MLS called Realtor Remarks, which is just for the real estate agents to see. And that's usually where agents are going to disclose this house has an unremediated sinkhole, or this house has Chinese drywall, or some of those major defects that are really devaluing that property. And that's why on paper it looks too good to be true. It's a huge house for a great price. Well, there's a reason. Yeah. So if it does seem too good to be true, go ahead and send it to your agent. Let them kind of dig in a little bit and see what's wrong with it. And 99% of the time, there is something going on there. So, yeah, generally speaking, you got to watch out for that too.
And not to say you couldn't get something that's like a foreclosure, right? And then like fix it up for what it needs to be. Maybe it's bank owned for a long time.
Yeah, the problem with a lot of those is it kind of goes back to the condition of the home not being good enough. If it needs too many repairs.
For insurance?
For qualifying for your mortgage.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Now, if it needs just some cosmetic updating, then that's okay. If it just needs flooring, cabinets, paint, but the bones, as we say, are good. It's got a good roof. It's got a good AC. The plumbing, electrical is sound. Those 4 points we look at for 4-point inspections. If all that stuff is good and it's just kind of ugly, maybe needs a little bit of updating, then that's definitely going to sell for a discount. And that's just normal, and that's okay. If the buyer has the resources and ability to do those things, then yeah, they're going to get a little bit of a better deal, and that's totally normal. But it would be priced accordingly, and you would still see that. It wouldn't look too good to be true.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about, it would be priced less than the ones that are move-in ready in that neighborhood.
Yeah, that makes a lot
to
of sense.
compensate.
Well, awesome. These are really super helpful tips.
Great.
You definitely know what you're talking about. You're super awesome.
Thank
Always
you.
amazing to have you on.
Love being here.
Yeah. Well, anyway, if anybody has any other questions for Crystal Brady, if you'd like to reach out to her directly, there's definitely going to be her information down below, either in the comment section, the description. You can just feel free to reach out to her via email, and also check out our blog. But thanks so much for coming on again.
Thank you.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.